Hello folks, it's Bluegrass Survival, coming at you with a knife review. Today we're going to discuss the Esse 5. This knife was made by Jeff Randall over at Esse Knives. Some of the specs on this blade to start off with. It has a length of 11 inches. Thickness is 1/4 of an inch thick. It's a beast, very thick, very hardy knife. Has a powder coat finish. Has that saber grind. This knife weighs by itself 16 ounces. The handle is canvas micarta. As you guys can see here, this thing is it's massive, very thick. Now, philosophy of use for this knife was made for down pilots behind enemy lines, so they could survive with this, kill if they had to, and try to get out alive. As you guys can see, this thing is just one big thick monster. I know a lot of people prefer the Esee 6 over this blade. The Esee 6 is very nice. I do like that knife, but I will say something about the thickness of this blade. If I was in a situation where my life was in jeopardy and I only had one knife, I would definitely want something that I know that's not going to fail. Now, 3/16 of an inch thick, I mean, it's a pretty thick knife, but I mean, there are some chances that thing could snap if you put it through a lot of work. Now, this 1/4 of an inch thick, this knife isn't going to snap. It would take an extreme amount of force to break this thing. I mean, I can't even fathom what you would have to do to break this knife. Okay, let's talk about the sheath a little bit. First off, about the sheath, it didn't come with this right here. This thing right here, I put this on there. I ordered it off eBay. But other than that, the rest of what you see here, the Kydex, it's very well done by Esee. I really do like the retention screw right here, which when you push that up like that, it will keep the knife locked in place. You won't have to worry about it falling out if you had it upside down. Plenty of holes there, so you could hook it to some molly if you had paracord, stuff like that. It's a very good sheath of very high quality Kydex. I think the guys over at Esee did an excellent job with this. Now, when I bought this knife, I really had a choice between this and the Becker BK2. Now, I like both knives. In fact, I have a Becker here in the house. But when I did pick the first knife that I wanted to buy, I went with this. And the reason why was because, one, it had the micarta scales. The Becker comes with Grivery. They're very slick. Some people like them. I'm a big fan of micarta, though. Micarta's my thing. And second, there's a glass-filled nylon sheath that came with the Becker BK2. And the glass-filled one was known to dull the knife. This thing right here is not going to dull your knife. This is Kydex. I did like this sheath a whole lot better. Now, the difference between this, in my opinion, and the Becker BK2, the Becker BK2, in my opinion, is more of a woodsman's knife. I mean, you take it out in the woods and you go crazy. It's a great knife, don't get me wrong. I do love the BK2. The handle shape and everything is great. The pommel is great. Nothing wrong with it. To me, this is a little bit more of a survival knife, simply because, I mean, look at that tip right there. It's not as say it's got more of a tip than the Becker. It has a bowl drill divot right here. Now this glass breaker right here, now this is not going to do you much good in the woods. I mean, there's not a whole lot of glass out there to break, but honestly, I mean, this is more like a survival tactical. Like in any environment, I think this knife would serve you well. How would I personally rate this knife? Well, honestly, I would rate this knife at probably about probably about a 7.5 maybe. I'm not big on the glass breaker, honestly. I wish they had a flat pommel. That's one of the things that takes away from the score. The other thing for me is the fact that it does not have a 90-degree spine. I wish you could strike the fire steel with this knife, but you cannot. You would have to use the blade here, and that would dull it, which you don't want to do that in a bad situation unless you have the means to sharpen it. If you was just out in the woods with this thing or any survival situation and had no means of sharpening your knife, you wouldn't want to dull your knife, because the edge, you know, this knife being sharp is something you're going to have to depend on. Okay? I'm sure there are other things you could probably find to strike your fire steel, of course, but it would have been nice to have that 90-degree spine. Other than that, in this glass breaker right here, if these two things were fixed on this knife, I would rate this knife a lot higher. As for the sheath, you know, the sheath is a 5. I mean, honestly, if we're rating the sheath like we rate the knife here, the sheath, in my opinion, is at least a 9. There's a few things it could have done a little bit better, but for the quality Kydex, the retention screw, and all that stuff, I would rate that sheath here as a 9. Well, folks, thank you for joining me here. And remember, it's not what you got, it's what you know. This is Bluegrass Survival, signing off.